Welcome to Pharmacy View, Technology and Pharmacy Business podcast series, where we provide regular interviews with pharmacists and key industry people within the Australian pharmacy and associated industry. In each podcast, we look to discuss aspects of pharmacy operation and how technology is improving or interacting with each guest's current role or pharmacy-related business. I'm your host, Scott Carpenter, and today's guest is sponsored by Shopfront Solutions, leading the way in digital marketing and communications, providing a cloud-based platform for pharmacies to manage all of their digital messaging and print-based collateral. For more information on the Shopfront Solutions digital platform, simply go to the website at shopfrontsolutions.com.au. I'm talking today with Kavita Nadan and Surge Singh from the newly launched Locumate Pharmacy Support Business. Welcome, Surge and Kavita.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Great to chat with you today. Now, I had the opportunity, obviously, to visit you both at your standard APP this year and find out a little bit about the service that you're now offering or looking to launch. But before we get into what is Locumate, I guess, all about, it'll be great, actually, for us to get an understanding of who is Kavita and Surge.
Sure, Scott. I'll go first, I guess. So I'm Kavita. I'm a pharmacist. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, starting as a junior and ultimately becoming a managing partner in my own store in Endeavour Hills. Throughout that time, I've had experiences from being a locum to being a managing pharmacist out in a rural area, and then becoming a managing pharmacist, which I am currently at. And I guess this is what has contributed to us developing and coming up with Locumate, which we will talk about with you soon. But I'll pass it over to Serge, who will go through his little history.
Thanks, Kavi. So, Scott, I've been in the IT industry for over 15 years now. Had dabbled in recruitment as part of that process as well, but been in the cloud application infrastructure space for well over 10 years now, and looking at all of the experiences that I've had in dealing with, how applications are built and managed and what they look like from a transformation perspective, going into this new, digital transformation for the last 5 to 10 years, that's contributed to my experience towards Locumate.
Cool. And obviously that's a nice introduction then there's a bit of a match here between the two of yourselves. I hope you don't talk about IT at the dinner table every night.
I'm not allowed to.
That's good. So how did Locumate come about? What was the story behind this?
Sure. Okay. So I'll tell you a little bit of a story about it because it's interesting when we talk about this. There is a starting point to where it all started, and it was during COVID. We all know back in March 2020, it was the peak of COVID. I had my two regular pharmacists who worked full-time at my pharmacy one day called in sick and said that they had to go get COVID tested. And back in the day, if you got COVID tested, you didn't get results for at least 10 to 14 days.
That's right.
It was horrendous. Yeah. So I ended up losing my two main pharmacists and having to run the pharmacy in the peak of COVID when we were doing, triple, quadruple the script numbers. Sales were crazy. The volumes were crazy. It was very hard to manage. So I had to get in a lot of locums during that time period.
Yep.
Close to 2 to 3 a day at times. So it was actually a month afterwards when I came home one day. And during this time, Serge was working from home and I was still obviously going out into the pharmacy, working and coming home quite late at night. And we would have this little ritual where I would come home and first thing we'd do, he would put on the kettle and we'd have a cup of tea and we'd just debrief around the kitchen table. Sit down, just let it out. He'd tell me about his day, but I would as well, considering it was very, very busy in pharmacy during that period.
Yep.
And I said, I'm like, I just received an invoice today, and could you believe it? The locum rates were close to double what I expected. And I'd literally, for that month, blown my budget on all wages just on locums. And I started talking and I started telling him that it's just, the whole process is just so archaic and it's just so, I have to manually fill out forms. I don't get told who's coming to my pharmacy. I can't communicate with these pharmacists. And he's like, oh, is this just a COVID thing? Maybe because they've been quite busy. I'm like, you know what, Serge, it hasn't. Because if I go back through the years, this is something that's kind of been occurring. And I've always spoken to him about it. But I guess during COVID this time, he actually had time to sit down and listen and for me to be able to vent out properly. And I was like, this has actually been happening for so long and nothing has changed. It's just that this whole COVID period's actually really highlighted it for me with the lack of, visibility over the rates, who's coming, to be able to tell this person this is what we offer. I remember I had a locum come in one shift on a Saturday, and they came in, and I got a call from my student or tech that the pharmacist actually didn't do pharmacotherapy. So if you think about methadone dispensing, Suboxone. And
Yep.
so again, and I went in and had to do all the doses, fill everything out for this pharmacist. And so what was the point of having that locum at that point? Do you know what I mean? And then I was
Yep.
like, this is so unfair. Like, I've hired somebody and they can't do one of the requirements of the job. But then when I thought about it, I'm like, but I had no way to tell the locum that's a service that we offered.
Yep. Got it.
So as I started talking, so just like, surely there's a way to be able to automate, or how about I look up something for you
Yep.
that I could potentially get from the internet. So I'm going to pass it to Serge, who'll then tell you his side of the story.
That's a great introduction to this, because you're
Yeah.
right. When you think about so many other areas of our life these days, we really have gone from paper-based and analog systems to instant connectivity. So really,
Yep.
the picture you're painting here, that Serge is now going to tell, I guess, the IT side of things, is that
Yeah.
there's a need here that could be so easily streamlined. Well, streamlined potentially easily.
Exactly. Correct.
Yeah. So as part of that process, I'm like, let me just find a piece of software that you could potentially recommend for the agencies to use to make your life easier.
Yep.
And I searched some more, and I said, okay, nothing in Australia. Let me look overseas, search the US market, search the Europe market. In the UK, there's about 50% automation.
Yep.
And this is something I've noticed with innovation anywhere, is when you innovate and you lead the market in something, you get complacent and you stop innovating
Yes.
because you
Yep.
own the market and you're like, okay, what else do we need to do, because no one else can compete, right?
Yep.
And whilst I searched for that, I'm like, okay, nothing exists to what the automation should look like. I'm an enterprise architect by trade, and what that means is I look at the overall picture of how things should work and plug together in an IT perspective, end-to-end automation. And so I said, okay, so nothing exists in terms of the problem you described to me, Kavi. So what should that look like? Can you describe the process? So I've got this architecture software where I started joining the dots of what the process should look like.
Yep.
And as we step through it, I'm like, this can be built. It's nothing in terms of that you have to invent new technology to solve this problem. It's automating certain processes and then putting them together as part of that. And that's sort of how the idea of Locumate was born. And we then thought, okay, how do we explain this to people, and how do we make sure it's validated against what people think? So we went out and built a prototype. And prototype, for the audience, is just in terms of being able to click through the process and having, almost what the app should look like without being an app.
Yep.
So we built that. And as we went through the process, we went and spoke to both sides, which is the pharmacies and the locums,
Yes.
because we had one side of the story, right, which is the frustrations from the pharmacy, which is what Kavi is like, someone walks in and they can't provide the service.
Yes.
So we talked to the locums, and the locums are like, it would be great if we knew that service was required. So there was
Yes.
missing information on both parties, and we're like, hang on, sometimes locums get a bad name, but it actually, as part of the process, they are just as having a bad experience as the pharmacy.
Yeah.
And
Because again,
what's
there's
caused-
a level of information that hasn't transferred between the two parties via a third party.
Yes, correct.
Exactly. And as we went through the process, obviously, we found a lot more information on what should go into the app. But it all started in March
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
that idea, that conversation,
Yeah.
research into the industry, us building a prototype. And then we showed some, leaders in the industry who, own large groups, have built their own businesses. And when they saw it, their reaction was, wow, I can't
Yep.
believe this doesn't exist today. This is what the industry needs.
Yeah.
And that gave us the confidence to actually go all out and get this built.
Yeah. So again, if I step through that journey from what I've just listened to, then is that you're right. You've got locums that are turning up to a pharmacy with no knowledge or vision of what they're walking into, apart from that it's a pharmacy. And secondary is that from a pharmacist point of view, you're not really sure who's turning up. So to actually make all of that connectivity almost instantaneous, which we can have today, is ultimately the challenge that you proved out to provide a solution for. So where are you at today, and what does it look like?
So the app is actually ready It was ready by the time we went to the APP conference, actually. But as part of the process, when we started talking to some of the groups and locums, and as part of the process, we need to do a phased rollout. Obviously, we don't want to launch everywhere and then not have enough supply and demand, obviously,
Yep.
from a
Yep.
locums perspective or a shifts perspective. So we want to take a phased approach. And as part of that, we want to make sure that we had the apps available on Android and the App Store.
Yes.
Unfortunately, App Store takes a bit longer because of
Yep.
the rigorous process from Apple. So
Yep.
we
Yep.
decided to put a date in of 1st of September for the official launch. Currently, we're going through the process of talking to groups. A number of groups have shown interest and pre-registered onto the platform to be able to
Yep.
utilize it the day it goes live. In fact, they're already asking us to go live. And then we're like, we need to follow the process. And then we're taking pre-registrations from locums as well, who would like to be part of this revolution, right, in
Yep.
the industry. And even at APP, when we spoke to people, they gave us their stories and we're like, oh, that's a great idea. Maybe we can include it as part of the app. And that's the innovation side of what we're trying to build. The app will never be complete in that sense, because
Yes.
what it looked like in at APP and what blew people's mind at APP, guess what? It's going to be different again by the 1st of September, because
Yep.
we've taken all of that feedback on board. And
Yeah.
getting that feedback was critical. Well, okay, that makes a lot of sense. We're just going to build it into the app because the locums need it or the pharmacies need it, and make this a complete experience where this app, once it goes live on 1st of September,
September.
Mm.
it won't just stay still. It will keep improving for the years to come.
Yeah, got that. And I guess so the challenge there is to, feedback is good, your vision is good, but obviously not to then overcomplicate the app, because again, if it becomes too onerous, then people will say, well, there's too many tick boxes I've got to fill out here, or there's too much information I've got to provide. And yes, I kind of want this, but I haven't got the time. So have you had that feedback? Have you had to address that challenge?
Yeah, so actually, the one feedback that we had is, can we add more information in? And
Yeah,
our feedback was, actually, no, you don't want to do that every single time, because then that's
correct.
going to become onerous, right? So
Yeah,
the feedback that we've had from the app perspective for the people at APP who went through the demonstrations and actually had a bit of hands-on with it was that we want to make sure that the dealing with the app is as simple as possible.
yeah,
So we collect a lot of the data at the time of sign up.
yes,
So when
yeah,
you onboard, the profile for the locum, the profile for the pharmacy is going to
pharmacy.
be complete. So
Yeah,
when you go to post a job, it's literally 3 clicks.
you're there because you've built your profile either as a locum or as a pharmacy in the back of this application.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
for a locum, when they log in after they've set up their profile and we've verified obviously all of the back end details,
yes,
is to accept a job is you literally click on the job and hit accept. And we've got all these videos coming out on some of the what that looks like. But from a locum perspective and from a pharmacy perspective, after you've registered, it's going to be very, very simple.
yeah. So can I ask then about the name? How did the name Locumate come about? I'd like it. I don't want to have a preconceived idea here, but I actually got a feeling that there's more to this.
Well, it's interesting because Serge and I argue about this. He claims that he thought of it, but he didn't. So I will tell you the truth, Scott. Locumate. So there's two things around it. It's an automation of the whole locum process. So
Yes.
you're locumating it, and it's the locum mate. So you think about the mate side of it. It's the locum's friend. So we talk about in the sense that when we built this app, we did all the research and we realized when we were doing the research and market research around the locums and talking to them that it's the locums that we really who do feel like a transaction out there in the community,
Yeah.
and that we need to build this community for them. So, making sure that they get the support that they need, that they don't feel like if they go to a store that they feel isolated. They're part of a team, and that team
Yes.
is Locumate. We will make sure that they have, the resources, the support available to be able to build their career, to be able to have the power back in their hands to accept shifts or to work the hours that they want to and have the availability so that they can progress, which is something that we found that they just haven't had that up till now
Yeah.
to the
Yep.
extent that they should. And especially with so many new young graduates coming out, it's really important that we start this. And Serge and I, one of our biggest focus is to do it from the perspective of students and making sure that we're there for them from the start of their journey all the way through until they register
Yeah.
as a pharmacist and continue on so after that. So hence why the whole name behind that is the premise of we are their friend, we're going to be their mate, and we're going to
Yep.
hold their hands,
Yep.
and also to automate that whole process, which leads to a better experience for both parties.
And you don't want to know the suggestions I came up with originally.
No,
Oh gosh.
no, that's fine. But that's, as I said, I suspected there was more to the name, and that's been good. So again, in effect, what I think I've heard, what I have heard here is that, if you're a pharmacy owner, you're a member of the guild, and so there's your group or there's your association. If you're a pharmacist, you've got the PSA. There's your group or there's your association. But as a locum, you're not actually currently part of anything, and ultimately this can become almost a hub for you. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we hope it does become. I mean, we've got so many things planned in terms of, creating that community feel, like having people write articles or blogs or, you know, create forums and have that ability to connect with other locums and pharmacies. And if they come to a pharmacy, having all that information available, they'll be able to feel like they're part of the team. They come in
Team.
and they're not just there to work that 9 to 5.
Yeah.
There to come in and they'll know and they'll have that connection already built from the start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and when people have heard the story and our vision, we've had industry partners already approach us
Hmm.
to be part of that journey because they sort of believe that, that is an area that, the industry's sort of forgotten about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we said, like I think people will forget as a pharmacist and as a locum, you're an individual, but in actual fact, as a pharmacist locum, you're a business in your own right. So you've got your own ABN number, you've got your own business model. It might be considered just as easy as you're doing transactional shifts in a pharmacy, but you've still got to run a business. You've still got to be educated. You've still got to be supported and trained. And so this is bigger than just a roster transaction, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So does that open up opportunity? And Kavita, I think you started to hint on this, is that there are pharmacy support businesses that are interested in coming on board because there's an opportunity for them to then partner into this arena.
Absolutely. I mean, training providers. I recently spoke with Pharmacy Support Services with Kay Dunkley because, if we're trying to build this community for the locums, we need to make sure that we provide support in the sense of, mental support, or if they have problems or if they have things that are on their mind, that they know who to reach out to. So we're trying to provide a very holistic approach to this. So whether it be through education and training, whether it be through support services, whatever it might be, but we're reaching out and trying to build all this and get it onto the platform.
As well. So on that note, on a episode I did a couple of a month or so back, talking with a pharmacist, one of the things I discovered was that sometimes pharmacists have their own kind of group of pharmacy owners where they'll share staff between each other. So if a particular pharmacy in one suburb's short on a particular day and they can't get a locum, they might call one of their mates and say, have you got anyone? And then they make a phone call to someone who's not rostered that day. Hey, can you go and help my mate over here? So this could address that opportunity as well within a smaller group of pharmacies that are not necessarily connected by a brand. They're probably just a network of pharmacies that know each other.
Yeah, that's correct. And actually, we've had a number of approaches from similar types of situations where they have pharmacists and they share the resources in between, but at the same time, they can't provide them enough work to keep them engaged, right? So we can fill a void on that side as well. We've even had the conversations with groups who have a set of locums that they want to use first and foremost because they know their processes. They
Yeah.
know what policies and everything like that. So they're called them preferred locums, and that's a suggestion that came out, and it's something we're actually building into the app. So groups can and smaller groups can identify their preferred locums, so they get notified first and foremost in some instances because they know their processes. And then to bridge that void, we're also looking at things like, well, how can someone become a preferred locum in your group,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, they need to know our processes, the software we use. So we're like, what if we brought those resources and made them readily available so they're actually a lot more comfortable with the brand, the policies, the processes, the software. So when they walk into your store, it's almost like they're part of the team. And that's we've received lots of good feedback about that. So that's something
But
we're looking to build as part of the process as well.
yeah, so does that then open the shop opportunity? And I'm hoping I'm not going to give away any secrets here. So if I am, we can edit this out. But Does that give the opportunity a bit like some of the services we have in our environment today, where a pharmacist could have a certain badge around a certain service that they have or that they're trained or experienced in? Does it mean that pharmacies can actually rate the experience from a locum? Is that the kind of area that you're looking at?
Yeah, so we've got a feedback loop for both parties.
Yeah.
And it's not a case of, we make that publicly available or anything like that.
No.
It's literally to gather information about how the service is going from both parties. And the locum side, we've actually aligned it to PSA's white paper that they released last year on
Yes.
the 2023 vision of
Yep.
becoming, the
Good pharmacist, and some of the qualities that they
yeah. So what we're doing there is we've categorized those key areas and we allow feedback from the pharmacy once a shift is finished and the timesheet is logged
Yes.
to collect that data. And it's not to actually publicly advertise or use that as a mechanism to inform about jobs, but it's actually to collect that data to be able to provide insights back to the individual locums in terms of areas that they're doing really well in, whether there might be any areas of improvement, because it's actually Kavi's vision. So I'll let her talk to it about how that data can help the community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, as I keep saying about this, the community aspect of it, but the training aspect that comes from that is probably the most crucial. When I started this, I said to Serge, the reason that we want to do this is to change the experience for the pharmacists at a store level, plus also the locums. And the best way to do that is if we get this feedback, which in the past, when we've done feedback, it's usually just been through a manual, Word document or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Bit laborious at a store level. It's very hard to get the time to do that, but a lot of the times this feedback didn't really make it back to a lot of the locums through the app, because it's something that has to be done as part of the time sheeting and finishing up the shift.
Yep.
That feedback will be instantaneous and will
Yep.
go straight away to the pharmacist. Things like interpersonal skills and problem solving and punctuality, all that kind of stuff that we can then give back to the locum, have that discussion and develop the training and development around it. Because what we ultimately want is, to be a better pharmacist, you need to have this feedback in order to be able to then go out and do the relevant coursework training that's required. Because if we can get the locums to improve their performance, improve their skills, you're going to have a better experience at a store level regardless. And
Absolutely.
ultimately this will just be a ongoing, that loop effect of getting better pharmacists, better pharmacies, and then the experience, as we said, will just keep getting better and better for everybody.
Yeah, so and that's a really good point there, because ultimately what you're looking to do is bridge that gap. Because if you're a pharmacist as part of a team, you're going in with regular shifts, regular rosters, you're getting to work with the team, and then you're either providing value or you're getting value because you're part of that team. Whereas a locum is kind of coming in for a fixed amount of time. You may come in once, you might come in a couple of different times, but it's just a transaction. There's potentially no personal development out of that, apart from the fact that you've got to work with some different people or meet some different customers. So this is going to bridge that gap, isn't it?
Yeah, and when you do work at a regular store, you are getting feedback constantly about your performance, whether it's through reviews or it's just, little chats, hey, do this better, blah, blah, blah. But as a locum, you don't get that. And to be able, like I personally, if I was getting feedback, I'll be like, this is fantastic. This tells me where I need to, go and focus or improve. And this is what we're trying to provide to the locum. It's in no way is it going to be in a negative connotation. It is purely just to give them the tools that they can then utilize to be able to, as I say, go and improve or better their performance. Every person, every single pharmacist out there can do this. And if you have that feedback readily available from different multiple pharmacies, it's going to give you a much better understanding on how to achieve that.
Achieve it, yeah. And the other reciprocal area on this too is from the locum back to the pharmacy. So one of the advantages of
Yeah, and that's what we've put that there, because if a pharmacy consistently gets a rating of a low rating, that's then our cue to go and have a conversation with this pharmacy, because there must be something that we need to discuss and that they need to improve in order to get a better rating. Because
the outcome is, I'm not getting any locums. Why aren't locums interested in working at my store? Well, we'll have the data to say, actually, they're not having a very good experience. And why is that? So, they be able to probe a little bit further. And we've even had, pharmacies request that, can we put in, because we've got the whole profile section of the pharmacy, the services, the software, how busy they are. And, we asked the question because we didn't know whether the pharmacies would be receptive to this. Oh, what about your checklist being available to the locum as soon as they accept the shift?
Yep.
They're like, that's a great idea. If
Mm.
they know exactly what's expected of them of the shift or just a little bit of information about the pharmacy, we feel like it's going to allow them to do a better job. Pharmacies are open to adding that as part of their profile. So we're going to build that feature in now because we've had that feedback. So it's all about that additional information to make both parties feel comfortable to be able to deliver that better outcome.
Yeah. So look, that's been a great chat. We've unfortunately coming to the end of our time, but we might have another chat in a couple of months' time. But I guess what's the call to action today? That, from what I understand, is to go to your website and either register as a pharmacist, which you can do now, or register as a pharmacy, so that as you're starting to communicate and release things, you can start talking to these business units.
Yeah.
Exactly. So on our pathway to launching on the 1st of September, we'll communicate with everyone that's pre-registered about how that process is going, which area we'll be launching first as part of that data. So that data is actually really, really important for us because
Yep.
then it allows us to do the rollout plan to make sure there's enough shifts available and enough locums available to be able to meet that supply and demand in those specific areas. So that would be really, really helpful if people could pre-register.
Yeah. All right. Look, thanks for your time today. Great to chat. And I look forward to watching this as we go through the next couple of months, and certainly on the 1st of September. So, and certainly wishing you and the new business great success.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for your
Scott.
time.
Thank you for listening today. Pharmacy View is a technology-focused podcast provided by Melbourne-based business Arian Technologies and Shopfront Solutions. Over the podcast series, our guests include pharmacists, retail managers, wholesalers, suppliers, and industry technology partners. If you would like further information on our podcast series or to participate in one of our episodes, feel free to send me a message or touch base through the Pharmacy View website, pharmacyview.com.au.